Russia's central bank just switched to emergency mode with a key rate cut. Debt service cost is spiking, fuel shortages are spreading to new regions, and oil revenues and tax intakes keep shrinking. Even officials now admit the economy is in trouble. The countdown to Russia's economic Armageddon has begun. Stick around if you want numbers, figures, and events, because I have plenty of that coming up. Welcome to Weekly Economic Update. This is week 37 in review, and the goal of this ongoing series is to document Russia's economic transformation in real time. Weekly consistent coverage gives a truer picture than isolated headlines. Every Wednesday, I track the same core dashboard: the rates, budget, fuel, revenues, prices, trade, markets, industries, so you can see what actually changed, why it matters, and where the trend is pointing. All my reports are built on verifiable public reporting, market data, and open sources. No hype, just facts and context. Now to the analysis. The economy can be analyzed at three main levels, each with its own focus and scope. They are the individual level, also called microeconomic agents. It studies individuals, households, and businesses. Then there is microeconomy, studies specific sectors or markets, and macroeconomy, it studies entire national economy. And this is how I structure my weekly economic updates here at Inside Russia, and I start with microeconomic agents. Basically, it's about what impact changes in the economy have on lives of regular folks and individual companies. And this week, I share first-hand experience with you. My experience. A few things have happened to me personally recently, and they show how the economic changes spill into daily life if you live in Russia, of course. Over the last week, I received a few telephone calls and some electronic correspondence. Before I tell you the details, I want you to know that everyone who called and wrote me thought I still was in Russia. And I played along. I didn't want to disappoint them. First, I got a call from a car salesman in Rostov-on-Don. That's the city that I was born and raised. It was a follow-up call. We already talked a few months ago, and they just called on my phone offering a new car, and me being me, I had quite a few questions for them. That was it. I didn't buy the car, obviously. And the last week, the dealer called again. I was offered a car, a brand new Russian car, Lada, with a very attractive discount. The salesman started with 50% off to get my attention, and when I acted not interested, he started begging me. He was begging me to visit the dealership, the office, so we could meet in person and talk over the deal. He promised I wouldn't be able to resist his offer. Now, when you want to sell something, you never beg. You try to interest a potential buyer with a good value. Car salespeople, they know that. Yet, he sounded desperate. I offered to talk turkey to this guy, and he admitted that the cars aren't selling these days and the dealership is on the verge of closing. The reason? No customers with money, and car loans these days are just too expensive with the key interest rate so high. He felt so desperate to sell me that I could actually feel bad for the guy. Except I didn't. The second call was a similar proposition, only to buy an apartment in Moscow. My phone number must be in a real estate developer's database of some kind, because I get these calls once in a while. I answered the call and received an offer that the saleswoman thought I couldn't refuse, or I would not be able to refuse. I couldn't refuse. It was a new construction in Moscow, well, near Moscow, 40% of the price, right before we even started negotiating. Installment payments, deferred interest free, to start first payment 24 months after apartment is sold to me, and the developer would partially subsidize mortgage interest if I were to choose to take out mortgage. I asked the saleswoman 3 questions. First, if they had any different locations, because she was trying to sell me something in south of Moscow, and I told her I like the north, perhaps the west. So I asked if they had any different locations, and the answer was absolutely, plenty. Plenty of locations and plenty of apartment types. Different sizes, different configurations. And second, I asked if there were any additional promotions and discounts available. And the answer was similar to the car salesperson. Yes, there are. You just come to the office and see me personally, and you will be surprised. It's going to be so tasty to you to get all these discounts. And my third question was, how was the developer making any money with discounts and promotions like that? And the saleswoman, she didn't like that question. She didn't feel comfortable talking about that. So we stopped the conversation. And the third call I received was from a commercial bank. I can't say its name here, but a salesman, again, offered me to open bank account for my company in Russia with unheard of preferable conditions like free fee-free banking, free money transfers, online concierge, business lounges at the airports, etc. Well, I don't own a company in Russia any longer, but I didn't tell the salesperson that. We had a nice conversation, and I learned that the bank has been losing business customers with an alarming rate and is now tripling bonuses to every salesperson who signs a new client. So the salespeople are out there hunting for new clients. And the reason for losing customers was given companies closing and going bankrupt at an increased rate, the rate much higher than usual, than previously. And on top of that, I received 3 personal messages from commercial banks with pre-approved personal loans. One was 6.5 million rubles, another one was 7 million, and the third was 7.2 million. That's roughly a little south of $100,000 in cash, personal loan. I could spend at anything. The interest rates were also fairly similar, 29, 29.5, and 31%. The banks kept sending these messages if there's no tomorrow. Okay, I keep on receiving quite a few of those lately. Now, what do those experiences, my experiences, tell us? The macroeconomic key indicators that I've been talking about extensively in the last couple of years, signaling crisis that started catching up with real people and real businesses. They are working extra hard to sell because their customers disappear. And that gives you an idea of what's going on the ground. The sales dropped. Most are lacking funds to continue their business as usual. There's large overstocking in new construction real estate and new cars. The banks are losing customers. That all spells disaster. What we're seeing now is Russian people have started picking up the bill for Putin waging the war in Ukraine. Now let's move to the markets. That's the second level. Microeconomics. I would like to tell you a few markets that I found something significant happened with. And the first one is aviation industry. Aeroflot, Russia's largest airline, just quietly shrunk its domestic aircraft purchase plan by about 70% through the year of 2030. By the year end, the group plans to sign for 90 MC-21 planes and to receive 108 MC-21 by 2030. No other Russian plane types are in the purchasing plan any longer. And if we roll back 1 year, Aeroflot's public target was 3 times larger. In September of 2022, Aeroflot's roadmap, signed with United Airplane Building Corporation of Russia, listed 339 Russian-made jets by 2030. Out of them, 210 MC-21s, 89 SJ-100s, superjets, 42 214s. That was the baseline. Today's revision removes the SJ-100s and 2 214s from Aeroflot's shopping list and cuts total units to 108. Minus 231 aircraft, roughly a 70% reduction. Now, the national backdrop. After 2022, officials talked about the revival of domestic aviation. Then, when Boeing and Airbus were out of the picture in Russia, they said, well, now we're going to build our own planes and plenty of those. In 2023, the Kremlin floated a countrywide goal of 1,000 Russian aircraft produced by 2030. Reality check? From early 2022 to early August of 2025, only 13 new domestic aircraft were sold in Russia, 12 superjets and 1 Tu-214. And the serial production of MC-21 plane, the brand new Russian flagman, SJ-100 and Il-114 are now pushed to the next year, about 2 years later than initially planned. MC-21 and Tu-214 still exist only on paper. Bottom line is, Aeroflot's revised order book and the actual delivery pace don't match the revival narrative any longer. The near-term picture is fewer new domestic airframes than promised and later timelines. That means a slower refresh of fleets and more pressure on existing capacity. We'll keep tracking orders versus deliveries as the 2026 production date approaches, not too far. And expect me covering the news every single time a Russian plane falls from the sky. Now, oil and gas. Very important market for Russia, as it's Russia's bread maker, or bread makers. This past week saw 100,000 barrel a day increase in production of oil by OPEC plus countries. They also released the plan to increase oil production by 1.6 million barrels per day in near future. It means that the price of oil will continue to decline, and that's very bad news for Russia. All that oil production increase spells lower oil prices. And Russian oil Urals did drop in price in August indeed, by $9 per barrel or by 13%. And on top of that, additional discounts that India and China demand now. That is the condition they continue buying Russian oil. The rumors have it, India is pushing Russia to provide $10 discount per barrel. The driver behind this oil production increase is Saudi Arabia. Its goal is very clear: to squeeze Russia out of as many markets in the world as possible. And I must say, it is succeeding. The next industry I'd like to mention is oil refining. Well, goes hand in hand with oil producing. Gasoline shortages are intensifying and moving towards the central region of Russia, according to fuel traders and market participants quoted by Reuters. And they're usually right. What began in August with just 4 provinces with shortages, now there are 20 provinces at least, perhaps more. It's just 20 confirmed. From Chukotka to Sakhalin, and Sakhalin in the far east of Russia, to Ryazan and Samara, closer to the country's core, to Moscow. On the ground, the first to blink are small private gas station chains. Many have stopped selling gasoline entirely. The big oil companies' gas stations are mostly still operating, but with intermittent outages in specific grades of gas. Why this is happening? Reason number 1: refinery outages. After multiple waves of Ukrainian drone strikes, at least 5 refineries were forced offline in August, cutting an estimated 17% of national refining capacity. And 4 more refineries were targeted in September: Ryazan, Saratov, Novoil in Ufa, and Kinev near St. Petersburg. That's Kirizhsky oil refinery. Kinev has reportedly shut its main unit and is operating around 3/4 capacity. And Kinev is a huge facility. That's my former customer when I worked in Russia. Reason number 2: no cushions. Many private gas stations entered the peak season, which is now, with minimal inventories because credit is expensive these days. So they simply didn't build any stocks. They relied on continuous supply, and, it was always the case. They bought gasoline from oil refineries and it was delivered almost immediately, scheduled. And it's not the case any longer. So those who didn't build up stock and not part of large oil companies, they're in big trouble. They don't have gas. Major producers are delaying wholesale shipments to secure their own branded stations first. As one trader told Reuters, this is my gasoline I paid for, and they haven't delivered it for a month and a half now. Bottom line, with capacity lost, inventories thin, and deliveries delayed, the shortage footprint is expanding towards the center of the country. Expect more localized outages, gas-grade substitutions, and longer restock times as refineries struggle to recover and distributors prioritize their own networks. And the cherry on top of the cake, Russia's oil pipeline monopoly Transneft warned producers that it may be forced to reduce output amid continued Ukrainian drone attacks on seaports and refinery infrastructure, Reuters reported, citing industry sources familiar with the situation. Now, this is even bigger than actually problems at the refineries and gas shortages at the gas stations. It's becoming not just oil refineries, but oil producers and transporters. This is the big deal. The crisis deepens. And by the way, this news and many other have been covered at Patreon account of Inside Russia. I select 9 news that I find significant and make them available to patrons every single day. 54 news per week. If you're interested in understanding Russia better, I suggest you give it a try. The next industry is banking. Russians rushed to buy up foreign currency, mostly American dollars. The dynamics of savings growth exceeded the record figures of 2022. And I'll remind you, in 2022, everyone who had even a little bit of rubles on their hands rushed into banks to exchange rubles for dollars because of huge amount of uncertainty. Now, citizens expect a new strong devaluation of Russian ruble by the end of the year. And this information comes from Freedom Finance Global. The expert drew attention to the data from the Bank of Russia, the central bank, and RBK, Russia's Economic Information Agency. According to them, in the first half of 2025, the volume of savings of Russians in cash, US dollars, increased by $1.4 billion and amounted to $93.5 billion in total. And obviously, Russians bought those $1.4 billion at banks. They exchanged rubles, they sold their rubles and bought dollars. Now, this number, 93 billion US dollars, is the largest increase in foreign currency savings after 2022. Why? The uncertainty is growing. The signs of Armageddon are there and they're multiplying. And people are seeing that. They live in Russia with their feet on the ground. So they understand that something big and bad is around the corner, and they try to save their money, keep the savings safe. So they buy dollars and perhaps euro. Mostly dollars, because they still trust in dollars more. Now, the next market to talk about is real estate, of course. Real estate is one of the cornerstones in the foundation of any economy. And in Russia, the cost of building private houses has decreased for the first time since, I don't know, forever. The Wooden Housing Association noted a decline in the construction cost this year. They attributed this trend to discounts and promotions from suburban developers. I quote Andrei Yelukov, a board member of the association and the head of Archangel Forest House Building. House prices on the market have plateaued this year, with no growth in the economy and comfort classes. On the contrary, there are seasonal discounts due to the need to free up funds tied up in the existing homes. There are lots on the market that need to be sold quickly. That's why house prices are falling, unquote. Andrei Yelukov attributes this trend to low demand in the suburban housing market. Low demand in the suburban housing market. Have you heard anything like that before? Low demand for houses. Houses falling in prices? It only happens when there's economic recession hits a country, any country. It only happens when people all of a sudden can't afford buying new houses and developers already built them. So there's overstocking. And when people can't afford paying mortgages, and then the houses get repossessed and thrown back to the market, and the banks need to sell them fast. That's the only time when house prices go down. And when does that happen in normal economy? Like never? Only in crisis? That's another proof Russia is in deep, deep trouble. Now, next to the infrastructure, road construction and repair has decreased by 25% in volume in the first 8 months this year compared to the last 8 months of 2024. This is the third consecutive year when road construction and repair decreases. What's the cause? Obviously, there's lack of money. The federal budget cuts, because road construction and repair is financed by the state. And the state doesn't have money for that. There is a big cut coming up very soon. The new budget for 2026 will be unveiled at the end of September, perhaps first couple days of October, and we will see another huge cut in road construction and servicing. Russians are picking up the bill for the war that Putin is waging on Ukraine. Car manufacturing. Let's talk about that. Car manufacturing industry reports more troubles this week. Russia's only manufacturer, AvtoVAZ, that produces Lada cars, that the dealer of Lada was trying to sell me one, remember? Thank you, but no thank you. So AvtoVAZ has announced switching its personnel to 4 work days a week. Back in July, AvtoVAZ sent its employees on a long unpaid leave, they call it corporate vacation in Russia, and warned them that it would switch to 4 work day week in September if things don't improve. Maxim Sokolov, the president of AvtoVAZ, has repeatedly asked the Kremlin and the government for support for sales subsidies, for grants, and restrictions of competition from Chinese brands. There hasn't been enough support provided, if any, and Sokolov announced confirmation of the transition to the 4 work day week starting September 28th. The measure will last for 6 months until March 28th, 2026. Very few people imagined that it would last so long because the measure itself is very unpleasant for people. What in Russia is called shifting to 4-day week, in reality is nothing more than a 20% pay cut to all people who work at AvtoVAZ. Put 20% plus inflation in Russia, and you'll understand that AvtoVAZ workers will drop their AvtoVAZ workers' living standard will drop significantly starting September 28th. The source of this information is AvtoVAZ. Not AvtoVAZ. Well, AvtoVAZ obviously, but it's been reported by Interfax. That's official news information agency, part of Russian propaganda, but there is no reason not to believe it in this particular case. The next news is, despite being pressured by the Russian state, followed by the secret police KGB, and demonetized by Google, I'm still here. Shaken but not broken. I will go on. You have my promise. Thank you for your precious time, for support, prayers, and love. Thank you for the coffees you buy me at buymeacoffee.com, for PayPal and Patreon. The financial support is never required, but much needed these days and extremely appreciated. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. There's one positive news today, and there's one industry that is actually doing fabulously in Russia. It is the funeral industry. The funeral companies now, they have many customers these days. Now the third part of the report. Macroeconomic indicators, the macroeconomic analysis, the general health of Russian economy. And I'll try to be brief here. Now, the macro stuff, oh, I love that. The central bank cut the rate by 1% to 17% this past week. It's a very strong signal that inflation is strong. 2 months ago, the central bank cut the rate from 20 to 18% by 2%. And most experts forecasted another cut of 2%. But the central bank announced it was deciding on either cutting the rate by 1% or leaving it intact. The central bank is under tremendous pressure from the military-industrial complex. Putin's closest friend, Sergei Chemezov, the owner of Russia's military-industrial complex, has been pressuring to lower the key rate significantly. Yet, the central bank decision to lower it only by 1%, it's a very small change. It cannot impact Russian economy significantly. It cannot impact the commercial interest rates. It cannot impact inflation. It's a small shift, more like a cosmetic shift. Okay, so the central bank's decision to cut it by 1% shows that the inflation is so strong that even threats from Chemezov can't make Nabiullina, the head of the central bank, to cut it lower. In general, this decision, 1%, is a huge indicator that everything is pretty darn bad in the economy. And it also is an indicator that the war between the central bank and the military-industrial complex, basically the war between the doves, the economy bloc of Russian state, and hawks, the military part, the war is at its peak right now. It's raging. It's somewhere under the carpet. But this 1% interest rate speaks volumes. It tells us that it really is going on. Now, a little bit on economic growth. The Ministry of Economic Development is revisiting the macroeconomic forecast and will submit new version of the forecast to the government in the near future. In its April forecast, Reshetnikov projected economic growth of 2.5% in 2025. Later, in July, Reshetnikov told reporters at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum that Russian economy was cooling faster than expected. The minister is recalculating various macroeconomic forecast scenarios, including a stress scenario, and a number of indicators in the baseline forecast will be adjusted. Well, at the end of August, another minister, Anton Siluanov, reported to President Vladimir Putin that according to the estimates of the Ministry of Economic Development, that's different ministry. There's Ministry of Finance, there's Ministry of Economic Development. Don't ask me what they're doing. Anyway, he told Putin directly that the economy would grow by at least 1.5% by the end of this year. Well, just a few days after, another minister, Reshetnikov, tells a very different story, that the things are not so shiny, and he is re-evaluating the economic the economic growth forecast, and he will release it to the public very soon. Nice. Two ministers are telling different things. One to Putin, another one is contradicting him. Have you got your popcorn ready? I certainly have. Oh, I love seeing that. Please note two things here. First, green forecasts don't come from me any longer, but from Russia's federal ministers. Second, notice how they use soft language. Stress scenario, economic cooling, soft landing. In reality, there's one word for it, the biggest economic recession Russia has ever seen, the forerunner of the Economic Armageddon. That's what it is. Yeah, take that soft landing, shove it up your throat, the minister. Give you one more proof that Russia is descending into the economic chaos. And this is very important. This is something you will hear only from me on Inside Russia. I'll quote Vladimir Putin. He spoke of the economy at two economic forums. In July in St. Petersburg and in September in Vladivostok. International Economic Forum and Eastern Economic Forum. In St. Petersburg, he said that Russia was going to decrease military spending. And that produced effect of explosion, okay? Because everyone started talking about that. And a lot of experts saying, well, you see, even Putin now realizes that the expenditures are out of control. So, he promised to cut the military spendings. In Vladivostok, just 2 months later, he said completely opposite thing. Russia will not decrease military expenditures. Now, him saying that was picked up by many pundits, but just about everyone missed the real reason behind Putin changing his opinion. This is one of those rare moments when Putin is not so sure and not firm. He's being transactional. Transactional, which is not Putin at all. He is always the boss, making all the decisions. And even if decisions are wrong, which they are quite often, he doesn't back out. Once he's onto something, he doesn't turn. Even he's dead wrong, he doesn't turn. And this time he did. And it's because he relies on the opinions of his circle. In St. Petersburg, at the forum, it was mostly the doves, those in charge of the economy. He listened to them. And they gave him the only recipe to fix Russia. And that's a very true recipe. To spend less and earn more. That's it. And he spoke of spending less. In September, he listened to the generals who accompanied him to China. And he spoke of increasing military spendings. Very transactional. And it's good. Transactional Putin is weak Putin. And weak Putin is out of the Kremlin Putin. And this concludes week 37 Russian Economic Summary Report. Thank you for joining me today. Carthago delenda est.